Hi, welcome to another episode of Life, Liberty, and Truth podcast. This is Christian here with Jared.
Hey, what's up, guys?
We have a special guest here, Colby. Say hi.
Hey, guys.
So, Colby is usually our guy that's behind the camera. He takes care of all of our video editing, all the stuff that you don't see. And so he's going to talk to us today about our new topic. Our topic today is Black Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. The difference here is the first one is an organization, and the next one is a statement. Now, Jared, why don't you start it off a little bit? Let's talk about the organization. Tell us about that.
Okay, so with the organization, obviously they push for what they believe in. They believe that the black community does not get the correct protection that they believe that they should get by the police, and they also have started a movement that they want to defund the police, and which, in my opinion, is an awful idea. But then you also have the statement Black Lives Matter. But Black Lives Matter is, it is a true statement because obviously Black lives do matter, but you also have to take into consideration that all lives matter at the same time, including Black Lives Matter.
Well, what would you say to the people that say just because people say Black Lives Matter doesn't inherently mean that no lives matter or other lives are less important, but that Black Lives Matter are more important at the moment with what's happening in the culture?
I think what's going on is that these people that believe that black people are not given the respect that they believe they deserve, because that's either what they've believed in their opinions or that's how they've grown up being taught, that they haven't received the correct respect from other people. But I think that Black Lives Matter is, in a sense, a way to disrupt the public in a way, because as far as I've seen, all these protests that have happened where Black Lives Matter has participated in, where Antifa riots have, come into play, and destruction always seems to happen in Black Lives Matter protests. And it never fails that there's some kind of violent act that happens at or during these Black Lives Matter protests.
Especially considering that on their website, they specifically say that they're for peaceful protests. They're a peaceful organization that promotes peace, basically. Colby, do you have anything to add?
Like Christian said, the statement Black Lives Matter is obviously true. But I think the organization creates even more division than it helps heal the current division. So I think it's important for us to realize that, of course, Black lives do matter, but I think we need to move past Black Lives Matter and start looking at our society as a whole instead of grouping each other into different communities based on skin color.
Yeah, I feel like that's happened before. Something called segregation, when we start to say Black Lives Matter or White Lives Matter or Brown Lives Matter. I think that just causes division. You need to start by saying, like, how do we all help one another instead of like turning ourselves into groups. So let's kind of start with what we disagree with, starting with the organization. Marxism. They have a very clear agenda of their Marxist values.
Yeah, so it's not a hidden, fact. It's a well-known proof that the Black Lives Matter co-founder describes herself as a trained Marxist, and she says so in an interview that is from the New York Post. And so she basically says that she's a trained Marxist, and so this is the quote: "We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories, and I think that we really try to do is build a movement that could be utilized by many black folks." And so I think the issue here is what I'm seeing is she claims herself that she's a trained Marxist.
Yeah.
So the reason why there's so much violence going on around these Black Lives Matter movements is because, these people are trained Marxists, the founders. And because of that, obviously, you have violence being introduced to these protests, and that's the problem that I think there is.
One important piece is that anytime you have any kind of Marxist revolution, socialist, communist, it always entails violence. It always entails getting rid of what was there before. So whether it's capitalism, a monarchy that was there before, look at the Russian Revolution, look at Vietnam, that was communist. Everything ends up violent in some way or another. You have to get rid of what you had before and enable things to work. And I think that's a good lead into Antifa coming in. Is what is Antifa? Antifa is an anti-fascist movement. What is anti-fascist? Well, first you'd have to search up what is fascist. When you think of fascism, you think of Hitler, you think of Mussolini. When people say anti-fascist, it doesn't just mean that they're against fascism. Anti-fascism, the word came from Stalin to talk about himself or the Communist Party in a way that didn't sound like communism. So right there, what does that tell you? Anti-fascism is communism. And so when you're talking about these Marxist rebellions and how Black Lives Matter is a trained Marxist organization, and you have all these Antifa people coming in too, then that's a major red flag. Because they're definitely related. They're both funded by George Soros, who is an avid opponent of capitalism, of democracy, and is pushing for these fascist, anti-fascist, I should say, regimes. Because how are you an anti-fascist, but you're doing literally the same things that a fascist would do by going in and whether it's taking people's guns, segregating people, causing division, causing uproar. And so that's my thing with it, is there's no such thing as a peaceful Marxist.
Right. Yeah, the Marxism is rooted in violent overthrow of, like you said, whatever the current ruling system is, or whatever they deem to be oppression, like the market. You kind of hit the nail on the head there. So it's only natural that anywhere you see a Marxist protest, even if it's supposed to be a peaceful protest, something always happens to make it the opposite.
And I think that's kind of a good way to also lead into reparations, maybe. So one thing that's coming out of these protests, I say with air quotes, protests, is that people are really fighting for reparations.
It's easy to see that in the past, in America's past, black people were treated very, very, very poorly.
To say the least.
To say the very least. But there are no more legal living slave owners. They're all gone.
Nor are there any more slaves.
Yeah, and there's no slaves either. We're talking in terms of race. Obviously, we have problems with trafficking and all that, but strictly based on race, there's no form of slavery that still exists in America. And, I would likely be part of the reparations thing. I'd likely have to pay to make up for what a bunch of people who lived hundreds of years ago did when I had nothing to do with it myself. I think it's a terrible way to try and repair relations between white people and black people. It's just going to cause so much more division than already exists, if that's even possible,
Yeah, and I think too that why should people be punished for something that they didn't do? Why should people be rewarded for something that they did or didn't do? Or that they didn't do? I mean, you should be rewarded for something that you did or punished for something that you did, depending on your own individual actions.
Right.
When you start talking about reparations, two things are kind of a problem here. Is one, what happens, what about the people who are either mixed race, they're half black, half white, half black, half Filipino, whatever you want to say. How does that work? Do you give them half of what you would give a full black person? Is there any truly 100% black people now? And I think the second problem we have too is, what about the people that have immigrated here from Africa or Jamaica or areas that are heavily black and that have migrated here? Do they get reparations just because they're black, even though their families weren't slave owners?
Right. Yeah, there's not even a way to enforce reparations because of what you just said. There's no way to pinpoint who gets what. And there's no way I don't even think there's a way to figure how much of our money would have to go to reparations to make up for, what happened in the past. And, I mean, all of this is besides the fact that, most white families back then didn't even own slaves. It was the wealthy elites who owned the slaves. And so it's not fair to take just white people in general and make them pay reparations.
Yeah. What about those families too, the black families that owned slaves? Kamala Harris. Her father was a prominent slave owner in Jamaica.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with those kinds of people? Do those people need to pay reparations? And where do the reparations come from? You're going to tax us more? You're going to give to people that don't deserve it? How are you going to pay for those reparations? And like we said at the beginning, is that if the rioting and looting is reparations, should we still have to pay reparations on top of that? Is that not the reparations? Shouldn't we just say, all right, you looted and you rioted, you're good? Or should we give them more? And at what point is enough enough?
Yeah, I think it's just overall a awful way to just run the economy, because if you're going to try to pay back the sins of our ancestors that may or may not have had slaves or been a slave owner, like, you got to think about how badly that can affect the economy too. Like, and how are you going to get that? Exactly like you were saying, Christian, are you going to tax us more? Are you going to fine us for that? Is that going to come from the states, or is more money going to come from the southern states since they had more slaves? Or how is that all going to work?
What about the white families whose didn't own slaves? You're going to make them pay for it too? What about the white families who great-grandparents, grandparents, however, fought in the Civil War to free black people from slavery? What about that? Are we just going to lump every white person into a group and say that you automatically own reparations because of something that your ancestors may or may not have done? So you're saying that just because you're white, you have to pay reparations because white people were slave owners? Isn't that racist?
I mean, yeah, it is racist. Honestly, like, that's what racism is just automatically just putting that person in that category and just, how do you want to say, punishing them based off of their skin color, right? For you may not know anything about them, but just because they're white, they're bad people that their ancestors, their great-grandparents were slave owners.
Yep.
Or, like, you gotta think about these people that live today, and it's crazy because I see a lot of people that have white guilt over all this, it's like, why are you upset that you're white? You know, you should be proud about your skin color, no matter who you are, and that you're an American, and that you're free.
That's what I was gonna say.
That's all that matters today, is that you are free, and you have the right to do whatever you want to do, to serve what.
As long as it doesn't interfere with other people's freedoms.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you have the freedom to practice any religion that you want. You have the freedom of speech. You have the freedom to do all these things, and to gather and to protest. You have the right to protest, and that is 100% okay to protest. The issue is that these Black Lives Matter protests always lead to violence.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Looting or violence, or people get killed or people get injured because of either Antifa steps in, who they claim are a peaceful organization when clearly...
Well, they're technically a terrorist organization now.
Clearly, as you can see, by everything that they've done, they've set tons of buildings on fire. They've destroyed businesses. They have literally trampled and dismantled states' economies and businesses' financial incomes. It is absolutely insane how this is all played out in the last 3 months.
Yeah, one of the things that I pointed out earlier that I want to emphasize again is how some of the financial supporters of specifically George Soros, the main money behind Antifa is also funding Black Lives Matter. So what does that tell you? The same people that are causing the violence and that are showing up to the peaceful protests, they're all funded by the same people. That's not a coincidence. That shows you exactly where both groups' priorities are.
Right.
So let's move in. Let's make a bold statement here. One that's still going around, but it's definitely bold. Black lives do not matter to Black Lives Matter. There. So let's talk about how and why.
Right. So, it's come out in the news a lot lately that, I think it's somewhere between 25 and 30 black people have been killed during these protests and riots so far. But, to my knowledge, Black Lives Matter hasn't made any statement, no formal statements. They don't acknowledge this kind of thing happening. And they don't acknowledge things such as the black on black murder rate. You can't just pick and choose with that kind of thing, especially if you're going to go around saying, like stuff like all lives don't matter till Black Lives Matter, or, something like that. You can't just go pick and choose which Black lives matter and which ones don't.
Exactly. And one of the reasons for this is abortion. If Black Lives Matter to Black Lives... If Black Lives mattered to Black Lives Matter, then why in New York is a woman statistically more likely to have an abortion than to have her child born? If you see a black pregnant woman on a subway, she is statistically more likely to be having an abortion than to have the child born. Think about that. It's literally genocide. Right. You're killing more babies that are born.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't remember the exact quote, but the founder of Planned Parenthood, which is the biggest abortion funder, literally stated that Planned Parenthood was formed in order to push forward the black genocide.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point of the of Planned Parenthood was to oppress blacks even more.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of where the statement of Black Lives Matter, all lowercase, comes in, is that Black lives do matter. Black lives, I would say, probably do matter more right now in the fact of of violence, of bad neighborhoods, of quality of life, maybe, if you know what I'm trying to say. Like,
Right.
Black lives are struggling more right now. Let's be honest.
Yes.
Those statistics are way too high. So how do you fix those? Do you go in and say, defund the police? I don't think that's a good way. I think what we need to do is you need to go in and you need to bring them into church. You need quality education. You need to reform the heart instead of just taking away all accountability.
Right. Most police encounters do not end in death or violence. And the idea that you can fix violence by taking away the authority in these neighborhoods, frankly, it's pretty ridiculous. It's not logical. Now, I would be more open if they were to say, we need better training for police officers. We need, straight up defunding the police is not a good idea, especially not right off the bat. They're calling for us to defund the police without any prior preparation. There's no other system in place to take over. They just want no more police. And, all that's going to do is make the death rate and the crime rates in general higher everywhere, not just in black neighborhoods, but just everywhere in general.
Yeah, you got to think about like who else this affects. It's not just, yes, there have been issues, and yes, there's, bad apples, in a bunch, or, you have those police officers that are crooked sometimes, and you may have those people, just like in any other culture or any other field of work. You're going to have those people. So you got to remember that we're all humans here, right? We all, have a part of evil in us, right? Like, we have that sinful nature that that has been passed down to us for, since the beginning of time. And so you just got to remember that since we're on the topic of race, and that this is such a huge issue right now and has caused major division in our country, I think we need to focus on how we can repair this. And I think we need to actually fund our police more, and give our police more training if they need so. I think we need to help benefit the police as much as we can, and their training and how they interact with people. I think that's what we need to focus on more instead.
Yeah. I think what we forget to also think about is unintended consequences. What happens when you're a single mom and someone breaks into the house in the middle of the night and you call 911, but the police is defunded? What happens then? What happens when you don't have people there to protect you anymore, when actual crime happens? Take out color in any of these scenarios. What happens when someone breaks into your house? What happens when there's a shooting down the street? What happens if someone steals your car? What happens when you actually need 911 and there's no more policemen to protect you?
Right. Police reform, there are so many ways you can define that, and the organization Black Lives Matter is committed to defunding the police, or I don't know if police reform in those words is on their platform, but
it's not.
They even people who are trying to reform the police, no one can come together on a specific way to do that. It's just defund or reform. There's no specifics, there's no details.
Yeah.
And, we can have those conversations, but the very first question we have to ask is, what good is defunding the police going to do for us right now? And the answer, I think, is it's just going to make things worse. We have to figure out specifics, and we have to have a good plan before we do anything of the sort, if at all. I think there's valid opinions on both sides of the argument. Personally, I'm in favor of demilitarizing the police. A lot of stuff has come out. I think more stuff was coming out before all the Black Lives Matter stuff started coming out, but there were a lot of things having to do with police having armored vehicles and military grade weaponry, and that's a conversation I'm willing to have.
That's a conversation for a different time, because
Yeah,
I would
it's-
definitely disagree with that.
Yeah, like there's it's just there's opinions on both sides that I think are valid. It's just people are trying to defund the police now. They want to get rid of the police now without any planning and any responsible conversation on the matter.
Well, going back to that, according to a CNN article called "Crime is Surging in U.S. Cities, Some Say Defunding the Police Will Actually Make It Fall," according to this article, in New York, the homicide rate for the first half of the year is up 23% over 2019, led by a huge spike in recent violence. In Chicago, homicides jumped 39% during the last week of June and the first week of July compared to the same period last year. And Los Angeles has seen double-digit rise in homicides in the past 2 months. Since the whole narrative of defunding the police, crime has shot up 39% in homicides alone in Chicago.
Yeah.
In New York, right, they let out a ton of prisoners because of COVID-19, right? Because of, the dangers of that. They let out these prisoners who kill children, who have killed people, who have done these awful crimes. They've let them out in the streets of New York.
There's
And
more.
Right.
What
At
do you
the
expect
same-
to happen?
They do
When
that
you
at the
want to
same
defund the
time.
police.
You're putting
and then
out
you put
more-
out criminals. Like,
Yeah.
what do you expect is
More
going to happen to the
crime
public?
and less accountability. That's a
Right.
terrible answer. That would be like if you had a child and you're a parent, and instead of punishing your child when he went and did something bad, you just did nothing and even told him, "Oh yeah, it's not your fault. It's my fault for not raising you right. All right, go do it again."
Right.
That's a terrible deterrent.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. There's no plan. Just defund the police right now. And that's a great way to cause more problems.
Well, do you guys have anything else you'd like to touch on?
I think what we need to do is stop making excuses for the way that things are turning out, and we need to just repair and improve on the mistakes that seem to always be happening and repeating right now.
And to say that Black Lives Matter is a peaceful organization that only wants equality is a joke. Here is an article from Daily Wire about one of the Black Lives Matter's founders named Yusra Kagali. She posted this on her Facebook page. Whiteness is not humexness, if I'm saying that right. Never seen this word in my life. In fact, white skin is subhumexin. I'm assuming that means like subhuman. That's the only thing that can kind of make sense. She wrote, "All phenotypes exist within the black family, and white people are a genetic defect to blackness." She goes on to say, "Melanin enables black skin to capture light and hold in its memory mode, which reveals that blackness converts light into knowledge. Melanin directly communicates with cosmic energy. White people are recessive genetic defects. This is factual." She then muses about wiping out the white race. Black people, simply through their dominant genes, can literally wipe out the white race if we had the power to. Okay, I want to stop right there. And she says they can wipe out the white race if we had the power to. So which is it? Can you wipe out the white race, or do you not have enough power to do it?
Right. You can,
That makes no sense.
I could fly if I wanted. I could fly to the moon if I wanted, with nothing but a spacesuit on.
If I had the power to. Okay, so it keeps going. Do you ever wonder how black people, after centuries of colonial violence, genocide, and destruction, no matter what system created to make us extinct, don't think that's ever been a real thing, but let's keep going. How we kept coming back. Is it because we are subhuman?
Nice.
Holy crap. And you're telling me that Black Lives Matter just wants peace and equality?
Right.
And if you defund the police, then everything will be okay? What the heck are you talking about? She literally said white people are inferior. They're genetic defects. And you're saying that white people are inherently racist? What?
Right.
And that they should bow to you because, or take a knee for you?
Yeah, right.
What? Why would you say that?
Too many people in the country are caught up on the idea of race, honestly. Like, I'll put it that way. Like, in order for everybody to be treated equally, we have to stop acting like we're so different from each other. You know, obviously our skin looks different, but we need to stop, trying to convince each other that either, some of us are oppressed and some of us are doing the oppressing. In order to move on from racism, we have to stop generalizing entire races of people on both sides. It's the only way to fix this kind of problem.
All right, last part we're going to talk about for the end. The kneeling of politicians and the creation of laws to help further the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it's defund the police. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about why politicians don't really care about Black Lives Matter or the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about how Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden have both been in office for 30 plus years, and they are kneeling to Black Lives Matter, and yet they're literally the ones that have the power to create laws, and they don't.
Yeah, I think what it is now is it's just a game of pandering to the black community, and this all has to do with politics, and all has to do with the November election. Whether you believe it or not, this Black Lives Matter, huge movement that is, encompassed the entire nation, and all this, defund the police and all these riots and everything like this. I think it has to do with the November election, and you can say that you don't believe that, but I personally believe it does, because just the fact that these politicians, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Jerry Nadler, Joe Biden, all these people are kneeling to
and yet do
Black
nothing
Lives Matter
about it.
And by the way, the scars that they were wearing, those scars actually represented the most wealthiest of slave traders
in African tribe, yes.
In Africa. So you have to think about that.
Is that a coincidence?
Is that just a coincidence that they just try to buy these scars? I don't even know what they're called, but
they're something.
Yeah, I can't remember what they're called, but they took these and they put them on and then they kneeled down. I don't know if it's a fact that maybe they know that it's slavery and they're kneeling because they believe that, right? You know what I'm saying?
Either way.
But either way, it is still a slap to the face, in my opinion, to the black community, like, no matter what you believe. And so I just think there's so much pandering to the black community right now to try to get votes.
And yet nothing's being
Joe
done.
Biden for the November election.
And yet nothing is being done.
Yeah, nothing's being done. And so it's just unfortunate that these people have been in office or have been in government for so long, especially Joe Biden. He has been in for, 47 years? He has had the opportunity to do this. And he was vice president with Obama, who, by the way, was black. And Obama didn't do anything for the black community.
Yep. So I think that is a good place to end on. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram or Twitter. We will be posting our videos on YouTube, and listen to us on wherever you get your local podcasts. Thank you. See you later.